Uh, Joining us today, we've also got Nathan Hensel. He's the Director of Information Technology Services at Highland Community College here in Illinois. And the two of us are going to be talking today about files, something that may not seem too terribly exciting, but it's something that's really important to think about in the environment because you probably have a lot of files that are out there, may not be managing them. Maybe you just say, you know what, my server's full, I'm just going to go ahead and add more storage. So we're going to talk about some ways you can be a little smarter about all of that. Before we get started, just a little bit of housekeeping here. First of all, everyone's line is muted, so if you've got any questions, please type those into the chat window, and we'll try to get to those as we move along. Depending upon time, we may pause and actually answer the questions right here on the audio, or we may just do that in the chat window. We'll kind of see how things go, and if we need to, we can also follow up with you guys after the webinar. We'll go through, you'll do a little bit of presentation first to talk about the solutions, give you an idea of what's available, and then you'll also get to see some of this stuff live as we move along. So with that being said, let's go ahead and kind of get things started here. And let's talk about just the nightmare that you may be seeing in your environments. You know, whether you're only supporting faculty, staff, or if you've also got students saving files, in either scenario, you know, you probably just have a lot of stuff that's out there. You know, and it's very easy to become overwhelmed with the way that things grow, and you know, it's easy also to say, I've got all these other higher priorities that I need to do, so I'm just going to put this on the back burner. But by ignoring the problem, you know, it doesn't go away, and it's something that just gets worse and worse. Hopefully you don't find yourself maybe in the situation that this lady's at in her desk, but it could definitely become a very bad situation. So let's kind of illustrate maybe a little bit and give you guys an idea. And so one thing I'm going to throw out there, and I've done this a few times now. A couple of these slides are new here, and the first time I saw it made me think of Saturday Night Live. Now, I don't know how many of you that have joined us today ever watched Saturday Night Live. If you have, you might remember where a number of years ago they had these commercials for Colon Blow and Super Colon Blow. It was kind of a take on the total cereal bowl, about how many bowls do you need to take to get all your nutrients. So just kind of think about that. If you remember those total commercials or the Saturday Night Live parody, think about that as we build this out, because it's really the similar kind of thing when we start talking about files in an environment. So first you may think, well, you know what, how much stuff do I even have? You know, I know I've got some people that are out there and they do word processing documents, so that's not really too bad, but oh, that's right, you know, there's some accounting classes. I know that they're using spreadsheets. They're keeping track of debits and credits. Yeah, that's a little more content that I've got out there. And oh, by the way, you know what? There's some classes about web development, and I've got all these CSS files and HTML files. These are all just really small files that now become, you know, a backup concern when you start looking how long it takes to back it up just because of the quantity of files. And then, oh my goodness, I forgot about all the media stuff. Either things that people are doing because they should be, right? Maybe they're in an art class, music class, whatever, or just stuff people are doing because they can, right? How many teachers are out there that maybe have their entire iTunes library sitting in their home directory, right? There's all sorts of things that you may find out there. If you've got a VoIP telephone system, you might see that people that receive voicemails actually have those converted to WAV files, and those WAV files are sitting out there that they've saved them. Maybe you've got some copyright material. You know, I mean, iTunes stuff may be a little more legal, but maybe you've got some stuff doing things a little more nefarious, and they're storing content out there that they shouldn't. Maybe you've got back office people that have student information lists and other things. They've zipped them up and they've been emailing them, and they've just held on to those zip files in addition to all the other files that are out there. And, you know, maybe there's even some explicit content, even though you may have different kinds of content filters and things like that to filter out certain types of internet traffic. At the end of the day, you've got people that might find a way to get around it, and next thing you know, they're storing this information that's, you know, really putting your your entire school districts and universities at risk. So you can see, as this builds out, we start to see more and more, and so that's why I kind of harken back to the total commercials or the super colon blow. But where it really explodes is when you start to really dive into it deeper and deeper and deeper. And that's, again, where I like to think of those others. So think about those people in mounds and mounds of cereal bowls. All those cereal bowls, those are your files. You got tons of stuff that's out there, tons of content that's out there. You may not have any insight, you may not have any tools, or maybe use a hodgepodge of a bunch of different tools to just try to get an idea, but it still doesn't really give you an entire, school-wide view, if you will, a enterprise view across all your different file servers, and you don't have anything in there to actually manage it, to actually control it, clean it up. So again, how can we go ahead and just start wading through all this and solve it? And that's what we're going to be talking about. And as bad as things are today, they're just getting worse, by the way. So even before we get into how we can fix it, we can really, if we think about it, there's more and more of a need as you get into it. So you've got IDC out there saying that on average you're seeing a 60% growth rate. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some environments where you see that much higher. And a lot of that is unstructured data. So in other words, the growth rate of data isn't just in your databases, but it's in all the files that people are storing out there. The bulk of it's actually in files. A lot of it's old junk, right? You see here over 40%, or excuse me, only 40%, I should say, are frequently used. So less than half are frequently used, and everything else is either not used very frequently, isn't used at all, or a fifth of the data, we don't even know what it is. There's like maybe one person in, one faculty member in one department somewhere who happens to know what this set of files are. No one else even knows. We call that dark data. So it's just, a really ugly environment, and it doesn't matter if you're a Novell shop or a Microsoft shop, or if you've got both types of file servers in the environment. These problems hold true because users are going to store their content on what kind of servers they have. They don't know what the back end is. They don't care what the back end is. And so from an administration standpoint, IT administration, you need to make sure you've got solutions that'll work with all that. Now, as bad as it is, let's talk about things that may be driving it, making it even worse. Now you've got the proliferation of smartphones and tablets. One-to-one is something that's really popular in the K through 12 market. Higher ed, you've got students just bringing in all their own devices. You can't really stop that or tell them don't. And so they're going to say, hey, I want to go ahead and get access to stuff. And yes, as a side note, we can help with that. We've been talking about Filer for quite a while now, and Filer is a great solution to give access to those files, make it real easy no matter where someone is, whether they're on campus or off campus. But what's that going to mean? That means that now they've got yet more ways to access their files, which means more ways to edit them and more ways to create new content. So this explosion of data that we've had, we're going to see that actually getting worse and worse as we move along once we start opening these environments up with something like Filer. So what that really means is it's even more important now than ever before to go out there and actually start managing all of that infrastructure. Because again, the longer that you wait, the bigger hurdle that you have to go out there and try to solve. And you don't want it to get to the point where you can't actually kind of climb that mountain of files, if you will, and clean it up. But it's something that potentially could happen if you don't actually go out there and try to do something. So that being said, let's start talking about some very specific things that you may be seeing in your environments and how we can go ahead and then start solving some of these kind of specific challenges that are out there. And these are just samples, right? There's tons of different challenges that are out there. Let's look at a really important one that oftentimes is kind of forgotten. It's someone gains unauthorized access to an area. You could see where a student maybe suddenly has access to files that they shouldn't have, maybe a teacher's private files, and you want to find out how did that happen, where did those rights come from, was it worse than you imagined, so you discover they had access to this one area, maybe they've got access to other areas that you weren't aware of. How do we go in and make sure that things like IEPs aren't accessed by people other than the special ed department, things like that. Very important thing that is, again, sometimes in the back of the mind, but a lot of times there isn't a way to actually go out and check on that. All right, so that's one problem. Another type of problem is, how do I go in and investigate this data growth? right? It's easy for me just to add storage, but I'm really curious, why do I have to keep adding all this storage? I just added, a couple of terabytes just 2 months ago, and now all of a sudden 40% of that is in use. Why is that? Who's using the most amount of stuff? What kinds of files are out there? These are things that, especially if you have a very large SAN, number of servers, things spread all over the place. Maybe you're a school district or university that has multiple locations, servers in multiple locations. It makes it even more difficult to track all that growth. But how do I get that in a single pane of glass versus going from one server to the next and the next to find it out? And all that is done through something called Novell File Reporter. So it's an enterprise solution, meaning that from a single pane of glass, I can go ahead and run one report that's going to give me comprehensive information across the entire environment, if I so choose. Or I can narrow it down if I'm only curious about a specific area. And again, it doesn't matter if you're in a Novell or Microsoft environment. We can report on network servers, OES servers, Windows servers, NAS appliances that are joined to an AD domain. A lot of different ways to take a look at that data that everyone's got out there, right? Who's got how many MP3s, things like that. And one of the really important things, though, is the security reports. And I jump to that just because I'll talk to customers and say, oh, I already have this free tool or that free tool that gives me some of this data. And again, none of them are typically enterprise-wide, but hey, you've got something that can tell you about MP3s, you like it, that's fine. But do you have something that's going to allow you to pick a particular folder and say, show me every single person in the entire organization that can access this? And it won't just be like, oh, show me all the groups that are out there. I'm going to enumerate that. I'm going to show you the individual users, and I'm going to show you how they're getting their rights, where those rights are coming from. More importantly, like earlier when I mentioned students maybe gaining access to things that they shouldn't be, and I want to find out, what are other areas that maybe the student could access. Pick that one user in eDirectory or that one user in Active Directory, say, show me every single folder that that person can access. I can do that very easily with File Reporter. All right, so two options there on the security side, by user, by path. Very important things to think about, and again, especially as you start doing mobile access, makes it even easier to get access to files. The last thing you want is to have your college in the headlines that students were doing something with all these sensitive files, all this information, all because rights weren't set up appropriately. All right, so that's just half the battle, right? Because so far all I'm telling you is how to get insight. Let's find out what's in the environment and who has access to what and things like that. I haven't done any remediation yet. I haven't done any automation. I haven't actually done anything to change the environment. All I'm doing is trying to get an idea of what's out there. Once I know what's out there, then I could start maybe thinking about policies to fix it. So let's talk about some of these other problems that come up and that actually need some sort of remediation and how that can be remediated. So one of the things I like to bring up is identity management, and I hope everyone joining today has an identity management solution in place. Meaning you take an IDM solution, maybe NetIQ, formerly Novell, or maybe you're using something else, and you tie it into your student information system, say that's the authoritative source for all my users, so when new students come into the environment or new faculty members are created, then the student information system or the ERP or the HR system, that goes out and is tied into eDirectory, Active Directory. It's tied into databases, phone systems, things like that, to go ahead and automate the provisioning of those user accounts across everything in the school. But that doesn't ever go on to the file system. And what I find is a lot of environments, a lot of schools will have an IDM system to handle all this, but then they'll come back and say, well, I still create my home directories manually, or I delete them manually, or whatever. So what if we had a way to actually tie into that, right? That's something that we bring up that's a really important thing to consider, is saying, take that IDM concept and let's extend that to the file system. Another thing too, and I touched on home directory, so let's just go right into that. Every fall, you have a whole bunch of students coming in. Every spring, you've got students that are either graduating or maybe they're moving to a different grade level or something like that. So how do you automate that process? Now, the creation part isn't always extremely difficult, but what I see being difficult is, number one, if let's say it's a K through 12 district, as students move from elementary to middle school to high school eventually, and as part of that their home director needs to move with them, how do you make that happen? And usually there isn't anything in an automated fashion to do that. Or let's say you don't care about moving it around, you just want to clean it up. Every spring you just want to delete all student home directories and that gets recreated in the fall, or when people graduate. How do you automate that? When I ask customers just how do they do it, period, I don't even ask how do you automate it, how do you do it? The answer is I don't, or it's a manual process, or well, I wrote some custom scripts that kind of go out and do it. But there's always just a hodgepodge of stuff, none of which are very elegant. So what if there's a way to just see those users being created in eDirectory or Active Directory, see them being moved around into different areas, see them being removed, see them being deleted or disabled, and now take action, right? And that's something that we can do. We can bridge that divide between their identity that exists within either eDirectory or Active Directory and all those file systems you have out there, again, regardless of whether we're talking a Novell file system or a Novell environment, I should say, or a Microsoft environment. And that's all done through Novell Storage Manager. Very elegant solution, and you're going to hear Nathan talking about it in a little bit, that basically looks for changes in the directory, so users being created, moved around, deleted, maybe group memberships changed. Once that happens, takes a look and says, all right, here are all these policies that IT has defined within the storage manager environment that says, users in different areas. These are where their home directories should be. These are the group share access they need to have, things like that, quotas, all of that. So if I see that where this person is, that particular change does actually have a matching policy, then I'm going to go ahead and take action. If there isn't a policy defined for that governs that, maybe there's a particular part of the environment that you just want to leave hands off. If we see there isn't a policy, then we'll say, oh, then we'll just ignore that change and we'll wait for the next one. So he's just sitting there listening to the directory and touching the file system as need be. It allows for full automation and really allows you to go ahead and take a lot of the manual day-to-day storage management activities out of your hands and allow you to move on and do more important things. So really, to illustrate this, I talked about having a student information system out there. So you've got that student information system feeding into some sort of identity management solution that then causes users to be created, again, Active Directory, eDirectory, doesn't matter. And then Storage Manager kicks in, not only creates their area, but then just manages the entire life cycle of this person. So from the time they're in the environment till eventually this person leaves the environment, we're able to manage everything. We're able to keep things nice and clean. So for instance, if you say in general people aren't allowed to have MP3s unless they're taking a music class, we can go ahead and make that a reality. No one has to check to see if that's actually happening. Storage Manager just makes sure it happens. So we do all of this stuff. And eventually, a user is disabled, we'll go ahead and potentially take action, or even if that user wasn't disabled, but deleted, because again, that is driven from the student information system. Deleted out of the student information system, or noted in there they graduated, causes them to be deleted out of the directory, and eventually we delete the user, and we delete that home directory, either right away, or we could say, you know what, we'll take that home directory, put it into a temporary holding area that we call a vault, let it be in that vault for 30 days, 90 days, 180 days, whatever your business needs are, and then after that holding time has expired, now we'll go ahead and delete all those files. Completely automated, and we can even handle things like legal holds. So for instance, let's say a teacher was fired for doing whatever, and you want to actually hold on to their files because maybe there's a legal discovery now over that user's information. A lot of times you think of e-discovery as being an email type of thing, but that could very well be also for just regular files in a file system. So when that happens, we'll go ahead and say, you know what, we won't delete the user, we'll maybe just disable them and make them a member of a group called Legal Hold. Legal Hold has its own policy that actually vaults stuff in a whole separate location that only HR has access to, and it's held out there indefinitely and doesn't ever get cleaned up at all. So something in this day and age with things are going on and lawsuits and stuff, you can have Storage Manager that really is able to go ahead and cover your back and make sure that you're not going to find yourself in a scenario that you don't want to be. Now, one thing I want to talk about, it's something that's Not always fun to talk about, but let's face realities. We know there are times where, for whatever reason, pressures, a new superintendent comes in a district, a new CIO comes into a school and says, why are you using Novell? Doesn't want to listen to any of their, arguments as far as why you're keeping it, really doesn't want to deep dive into this and get the full story and make an informed decision. They just want to say, I want to move. Story's, over. When that happens, how do you do that? That's something where we can still help. So keep that in mind, that we're able to actually assist if you do have to make a migration from NetWare or OES and eDirectory over to Windows and AD or NAS and AD. And so anyone that has OES, first of all, has a free entitlement to the basic bundle version of Identity Manager. So we talked earlier about everyone should have an IDM solution. That's in there to sync eDirectory to Active Directory, so that can actually take care of getting your users in AD. And then Storage Manager can go ahead then and do the migration, get your data moved over to the new Microsoft environment. When it does so, it'll go ahead and reassign all the correct rights. So we'll be able to map the eDir users over to their Active Directory counterparts. We're able to go ahead and preserve all the metadata, so all your timestamps, things like that are all preserved. Excuse me. And then when it's all done, it's not just a migration tool. All those benefits that I talked about that Storage Manager brings, it was bringing it to you in a Novell environment, now it's bringing it to the Microsoft environment. So that's also the beauty of using Storage Manager to do the migration. Make it easier to migrate if you're forced to do so, and definitely please talk to us if you're considering it, because we'd like to know why, and maybe there's some things we could do to help you that actually may make you think twice and you don't have to migrate. But if the decision's been made and you're going to migrate, let us make it easier and let us continue to manage that Microsoft environment when you're all done. And you actually see a quote there from a university over in Europe that did this, and it made their life much, much easier versus trying to find another way. So at the end of the day, we've got several products that are really part of our file management story. I've really only touched on two components because those are the two biggest ones that I see, especially in academic environments, which is File Reporter, Storage Manager. We do have a third component. If you're a Novell customer, that third component, you already own it. It's free. It's a feature of OES called Dynamic Storage Technology, or DST. Allows you to do archiving of your tiering rather of your information, so that if you do have all that old content, File Reporter maybe shows you that the bulk of your files haven't been modified in more than a year. You can actually use DST to say, I'm going to have my older files on a second tier of storage, cheaper SAN storage, whatever, but users don't notice a difference. They go to their G drive and still see all the files. The only thing they might notice is older files take just a little longer to open up, an extra second or two, because it's on slower storage. In a Microsoft environment, Windows doesn't have anything built in, so we sell that as a product. In a Microsoft world, we call it Dynamic File Services. Same thing as DST, does that archiving, and that's, again, that third piece of our file management suite. If you're a Novell customer, you can actually buy FMS for OES that just packages Storage Manager and File Reporter, because it takes into account the fact you already have the third piece. If you're a Microsoft environment, though, you can buy just regular File Management Suite and get all three pieces. But obviously, all these parts are available individually as well, so you don't have to go with the suite. If you say, right now I just want to start reporting on what's there. I don't even know if I can get buy-off to start managing it, but I at least want to see what's there. That's fine. Let's just talk File Reporter, and then you can move into the entire suite later on. Now, a success story I want to talk about, you're not on the phone, and then I'm going to hand it over to Nathan to kind of talk about some of his experiences. But I want to mention University of Cincinnati, and it's a real interesting story of leveraging both Filer, and I mentioned that briefly, and leveraging Storage Manager. So their environment, part of it was they needed a secure way of sharing files, something for faculty staff. So Novell Filer rather was able to do that. But then their other problem was 15 terabytes of SAN storage that was out there that at one point wasn't managed at all. And they added Storage Manager in there, eventually added File Reporter as well. So now that they are able to get insight as far as, okay, I've got 15 terabytes of storage, what's using all that? Now they know. They're able to go ahead and manage all that so they can be smarter with their storage. And they've got Filer coming in and tying into all this, so home directories that are automatically created and deleted and things like that by a Storage Manager are then accessible by Novell Filer. So I bring this up because I actually spoke with another university recently that said, hey, we're thinking about putting in a new SAN. I said, well, you know what? As part of that planning process, at a minimum, you should have File Reporter in there, if not all of FMS. At least know what you have, and maybe even clean it up first. Because after all, if you're going to be moving in real life, moving to a new house, would you have the garage sale before you move or after you move? You would probably analyze what you have in your house, as in report on it, and you would have a garage sale to clean it up, as in manage it like storage manager. Then you would have your your actual move, so you're moving less into your new house. Same way here. If any of you are ever looking at buying new servers with direct attached storage, buying new SANs, and you're not using File Management Suite, File Management Suite, as I told this other university that's looking at buying a new SAN, could actually save you money, because the money you spend on here could be a lot less than what you would buy on just buying a whole new SAN with enough Tier 1 storage to hold everything that you have today, when you really don't need to be doing that. So anyways, University of Cincinnati, that's what they did, and it's real neat to see their quote there towards the bottom. Excuse me, as really they like the fact how everything can really integrate together, and that's what they see from all of our solutions that they use. So with that, Nathan, I'll just turn over to you for a moment. So you mind kind of speaking about, kind of what your experiences have been with a storage manager in your environment?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, Joe. So we are a two-year community college, and we do have an identity management system, and we put that in obviously to manage identities and tie into our email system and all the wonderful things. And as a part of the identity management system, when we were speccing that system out and getting that implemented, the consultants that we had hired had said, hey, you should really consider putting in Storage Manager. And if any of you have been through the Identity Manager implementation process, there's quite a bit involved with that. And we're a fairly small staff, small school, and we were kind of in new product and new technology overload with the identity management system, and we said, why don't we look at that at a little bit of a later date? So the consultant said, well, okay, that's fine, and so they helped us kind of write a little custom script that provisioned our home directories. And it wasn't shortly after they did that for us, which is exactly what we asked, and it did exactly what it should do, that it became very obvious that a more feature-rich solution like Storage Manager was really the product that we were going to need in order to really take advantage of all the now identity-linked events that we had in our environment. So, like I said, shortly after that, we did implement Storage Manager in our environment, and what we have it currently working on for us is creates. So when a new user is created by the identity management system out of our student information system, there are policies that have, like Joe mentioned, that have different sets of rules that say, depending on who you are, it creates your home drive folder on this volume. It associates the proper rights, and then depending on who you are, you get a different quota for how much storage you're allowed to actually store on the specific volume. In addition to creates, it also helps us with our renames. So when in a community college, we maybe lesser, of course, in a K-12 environment, but we have a lot of students that are getting married or perhaps divorced, and they have a lot of last name changes, so that changes our usernames often. And without Storage Manager, that was a very manual, tedious process, having to touch the rename in multiple places to get that to work for the user. And now, as soon as it updates in the identity management system, it pushes that through all the way down to the storage level, renames the folder, renames the attribute, and in our case, directory on where their storage is pointing and configured. And that's a pretty much a hands-off operation for us in that regard. In addition to rename operations, it also helps us with moves. Again, within our identity management system, we have our users classified by their account type, and within they're either a student or a faculty member or administrator, and there are some occasions where either a work study or a student will get hired on in a part-time capacity to maybe teach a specific course, a part-time course or one course, or they'll start working in one of the business operations of the college, and then we change, we keep their student account, we change their account type from a student account type to either a faculty or an administrative account type. When we do that, the policies and the rules within Storage Manager know to be able to to move the actual folder. It picks the folder up off of one volume and moves it to the other volume, and then it updates their quota and then their management policy for storage as well. So then the other neat feature that we have it doing too is deletes. Of course, like Joe mentioned, when everybody, when we go through and purge accounts, we have quite a few that we'll delete off of the system, and we have two separate rules that occur for our deletes. If you're a student and we delete you, it holds on to your storage for 2 weeks. So if we delete the account, the storage is still just sitting there in limbo for 2 weeks, and if nobody calls and asks for it or needs anything out of it after that 2-week period of time, then it just deletes it. And that's obviously customizable for whatever your needs are, but that's what we had chosen to do because we already have the accounts disabled for 60 days prior to that. For faculty and staff, when we delete their accounts, there's also a policy in there that says don't delete their storage, but rather vault it or copy it, or move it, excuse me, not copy, but move it to another volume. So we have a specific volume just called termed, and after a staff or faculty member leaves and we delete their account out of the directory, it moves the storage over to the termed folder, and then it sits there, and then we can go through periodically and groom that and clean that up. One other point that I would mention that we've used Storage Manager for too is a server migration. We had a migration that we were doing from one platform of Open Enterprise Server to another platform of Open Enterprise Server, another version rather of Open Enterprise Server, and because of some other things that we were trying to pull off in that same move, we were actually able to use Storage Manager to enforce updated policies on all the users, and it picked up the directories of all of our student and staff users and moved them from one server to the other for us. So that's definitely a real scenario that worked out well for us. So I think one of the things that I wanted to show here.
Yep. And let me switch you to the presenter here, Nathan.
Okay.
Oh, I think you got it. All right.
All right. I think I am. Okay, sounds good. Is the Storage Manager Quota Manager? So let me log out and we'll start from the beginning. So we give this URL right here that you see in my browser to all of our help desk staff, and they can hit that obviously from any machine that they're at. And if they log into it with their own credentials, it takes them into this little tool here where it allows them to look up any user on the system. If somebody calls and says, hey, my home drive is full, my H drive is full, I'm getting errors, we can come in and search for them. So it even allows like wildcard searching, so we'll search for this last name. And it returns a list of everybody who is, who obviously meets the criteria. So it tells, obviously who they are, where their storage is, how much space they have available, and what policy they're managed by. And one of the neat things to do is let's pick on this user here, Sam. When you go in and you click on the user, it tells you what their current quota is and how much space they have available, and what then our help desk operators are able to do is add additional storage to the quota or subtract. But one of the things that we kind of like to work with our help desk folks on is saying, before you do that, click on this perform analysis rather than just giving away free storage all the time. Sometimes users don't know some of the things that they're storing out there and that they even still have them, or they know they've got them, but they had no idea how big they were. So this little perform analysis goes through in pretty quick order and analyzes that person's home directory and tells, obviously sorts by what type of file and what they have. So obviously this user has a decent amount of JPEGs and MP4 files that before we just plop down another 100 or 200 meg of storage, you could say, hey, are you still using all those MP4s? And they're like, oh, no, I'm done with those. I can delete them while they're, So that kind of saves on just storage usage, I guess, over time all the way around, just in terms of being good stewards of storage use. So, but it's real easy then for them to just add the 100 meg to the quota. They just click on it, it adds it, and they're done, and the user gets back to work, and the technician can log out and go about their day. So that's been a real benefit to have distributed quota management so that our help desk staff can do that for users. It doesn't have to be server administrators or folks of that sort. So that's been a big benefit for us. One other quick thing I guess I would show is in the Storage Manager interface, within the tool, the management tool, we have our policies, and we're basically running on 2 different policies. We just have one for employees and one for students. We just have a very straightforward, easy easy approach to our storage manager implementation. So it really is not all that complex to use or set up. And to be honest with you, we just really set it and forget it. We really don't get into the manager and make any changes very often. It just kind of sits there and works in conjunction with our identity management system. So really just a few things that I guess I'd highlight in here. You can say who it applies to. So this is where all of our administrative users sit. And then you can specify what rights they have, specify their quota, and then what happens to them when you delete the account. In this case, it moves it to the termed volume, like I mentioned earlier. Lots of other options you can sure do in there. Some we think of doing, some we may wish to do someday, but it was really a pretty straightforward implementation for us and really takes care of all the things that I had mentioned earlier on that. Joe, was there anything else you wanted me to highlight in the demo?
No, I think you covered pretty good about just how powerful it is, how you can offload the quota management, and really how simple you're able to keep Storage Manager in your environment. So that's great. Thank you, Nathan.
Sure, no problem.
All right, and so we'll flip it back over to me, and I'll show some additional pieces here. All right, so let's get out of PowerPoint, and let me go to the VM I've got. Now, Nathan, I know you mentioned you did server migration OES to OES. You're in eDirectory OES Novell environment that you're managing there, right?
Yes, we are. That's correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I just, it's kind of neat that, we're able to kind of show both of this. So Nathan was showing you some of the stuff they're doing in a Novell environment. I'm going to show you just with a sample Microsoft environment here that I've got up, just to give you an idea of things. Now, I'm not going to hop into the Storage Manager interface itself. I may if we get another minute to show how I'm doing this. But what I want to do is really show the life cycle stuff, kind of like what Nathan was showing. Let's show how that actually happens from a directory standpoint, in this case Active Directory, and how that goes out to the file system. So what I'm going to do in this kind of fictional school district is I'm going to create a middle school student. So this is someone that just may moved into the district, new middle school user. This person is going to go to high school and then eventually graduate. In fact, this always makes me think of Billy Madison, actually, because I think this person came to middle school and 2 weeks later went to high school, but that's just my silly thinking. Anyways, so let's go out here and let's create a new user. And I think I've used Billy Madison before, so you know what? Let's use Nathan Hensel. All right. And before I create it, so you know it's no smoke and mirrors, I'm going to go to the middle school users folder and see whether there isn't a middle school person by the name of Hensel. So I just wanted to illustrate that before I go through and finish creating this. Let's give Nathan a password. Never expires. So what's happening now in the background is the users created, there is a particular component of Storage Manager called Event Monitor that's basically looking for events in Active Directory. So again, users created, moved, deleted, or group membership changes. So that's running in, that's processed in real time, and then what happens is then the policy portion will look and say, do I have a policy? Which, yes, there is a policy here tied to this particular container, this OU in Active Directory. It says, okay, what should I do? And this actually does several things in the environment. So this is going to go create a home directory, give access. I think there's a share that's out there. I think there might even be a permanent file that I do, because I like to sometimes illustrate that for the HR area, that there's a permanent file, and I should be able to show that too. So all that and the magic of VMware, using a lot of memory on my machine, means sometimes, for this demo, it takes like a minute or two for all that to happen in the background. In a true production scenario, you would see this happen very quickly. But let's look. So I've been talking for maybe 2 minutes. Now we can see the Hensel folder created. Now, it's not just an empty folder. Keep in mind, we've actually populated it with some data. So there's, in this fictional organization, they're using AD. They absolutely love GroupWise. They realize it's just the best email system ever, so they want all their users to have a GroupWise quick reference card. But at the same time, they also want to make sure they have a copy of an acceptable use policy that the person will probably never actually read. So that's all out there in the home directory. So it's not just creating the directory. We're going to go out there and stage it with whatever data you want. You just basically create a folder to use as a template and say pull everything over. And the other neat thing is if I go into Nathan, remember I didn't make any edits to him. All I did was just create him through that little wizard and I was done. Yet if I go out here to the profile tab, I can see his home directory has been specified, which is great for Filer. If Filer was in this environment and did an LDAP sync, not only would that user now come over, but Filer would know about the home directory and be able to give Nathan access to his home directory via My Files, all because this has been populated. If this wasn't populated, Filer may not do that. Depends on how you have Filer 1.1 configured. But anyways, so I wanted to go ahead and highlight that. So all right, that's great. Nathan has gone through his couple years of middle school, or maybe was it 3 or 4 years of middle school for you, Nathan, before finally you moved on? No, I'm just joking. And anyways, let me go ahead and we're going to go to All Task here, and we're going to move Nathan over into the high school. And here's our users container. Boom, move to the high school. So again, as part of this, storage manager is going to come in here and basically look, hey, an event happened, do I have a policy? And what he's really doing is saying, okay, there's a new policy to high school users that say your home directory is supposed to be off in another location. So because of that, and I should probably get out of here, so now I may have just caused this to have to retry itself, so we'll give it an extra minute here, so shame on me. But that's one of the things the storage manager does, is actually looks if it's open. If it's open, it's going to continue to try to retry the home directory. It also makes some changes as far as temporarily removing rights. Even that home directory attribute temporarily gets changed to something else, because really the idea there is if the user were to log in, we don't want that person accessing their home directory and making changes as this content is getting moved, because the policy says, oh, as a result of the move, your home directory should be somewhere else. So we do some safeguards, and we're not really doing a move per se, but we're doing a copy, and when that copy is done, we do a delete. And you have some flexibility, too, to say when this is allowed to happen. So you could say these moves are only allowed to occur from, say, 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. Monday through Friday, and all day Saturday, Sunday, as an example. So you could definitely go ahead and have some flexibility there. But now that I go into the middle school folder, notice how that's gone. So Nathan got moved. We should see him in the high school folder. There he is. An interesting thing too is see how now all of a sudden there's a quick reference card. So we can say as a middle school student he actually wasn't given access to Filer. Now that he's in high school he is. And basically the point there is that's the kind of a use case, but really what Storage Manager is doing is saying, hey, there's a new set of templates for this new location. I'm going to copy that in there, but I'm still preserving everything else. I'm going to move your existing stuff and pre-populate with new content if that needs to happen. Right? And then if I come in here and take a look at Nathan's user, and I can actually kind of scroll over a little bit and I can see that UNC path to say users high school. So notice how we're updating that. So that's important to note too, is again just how we initially created that home directory attribute in Active Directory. We updated that. So all this is just part of normal moving people around and updating them. We want to make sure that whatever directory you're using, that the home directory attribute in your directory is populated with the correct location. So now, finally, what we want to do is come in and say, you know what, Nathan has graduated, so as a result, I am going to just delete Nathan's account. So congratulations, Nathan. All right, and we'll give it a minute here. Again, it shouldn't take too long, and we're going to actually see Nathan's folder disappear from here, but I'm going to show you the vault area and actually illustrate that we're actually keeping still a copy of this information around. In fact, there you see very quickly that moved up. Now I'm going to go up a couple levels because the vault is a whole separate share in this case, or it could be a different volume if it was an OES server. And go to the user vault. There's a high school folder, and notice how there's a Hensel folder in there, and that's got all of his files. And so then I could either choose to say just keep it in the vault forever, or I could then automate cleanup from the vault. So I could say, you know what, if no one has needed this stuff for 90 days, I just want this stuff gone altogether. So it's a real neat thing that we can do. Now, I was showing them, maybe we were thinking about Nathan as being a student, but let's say Nathan was actually a faculty member. So earlier, remember I said I think there's also some secondary stuff for an HR thing. So let's go out and take a look if that is the case. HR department, right, or this could be the district office or whatever. We actually want to have kind of a permanent personnel file on all faculty staff. So I come out here, look at terminated employees, and oh, it looks like I didn't set that up for this particular policy. So I do that demonstration usually when I do more of my commercial demo, and so shame on me for getting that little piece there. But I could have very easily said, you know what, he's not a student, and that's really where I normally frame this up, that this person is graduating grade levels. I'm going to say, you know what, he was a teacher at the middle school, later on became a teacher at the high school, later on quit and went to teach at another district. And so if that were the case, I would have actually wanted to have a policy that goes in and creates that permanent personnel file. And as long as that's an active faculty staff member, I've got that out there. Once they're terminated, it's gone. Just to give you an idea what that looks like, you can see I can have in there if they, maybe if they had expenses, which they probably wouldn't, but I would want to have maybe their reviews and insurance claims that they've submitted, stuff like that. Have all that stuff that's stored out there. And the other thing to keep in mind here, if I do this, the user themselves doesn't have rights. So really, you could think, and the reason I'm bringing this up is to show how flexible this can be. I can go ahead and basically say you've got your main home directory, but there are other directories that are specifically tied to that user, and the user may or may not have rights to it. If it makes sense for this person to have a secondary home directory or a tertiary home directory, they'll have rights to it, but it could also be a personnel file, and only the district office, people there, only HR department would have rights to it. So there's a ton of flexibility just over individual folders for users. But to show you, another thing here, let's see if I should have that here in the middle school where I've got it set up. Let's talk about how we can use this on a kind of a more class basis. So the thing that you may see in a lot of cases is a teacher will go out there and say, hey, I want to go ahead and have my own area here for my class. Like you can see here, I've got 6th grade English, 8th grade algebra, and so on. And they want students to be able to access it and things like that. By doing Storage Manager, we can manage even a kind of classroom area versus doing that manually. So let me go out here. Let's just create a new group, and I'm just going to call it Freshman English. All right. So, English class here. Now, a couple of things I want to do. I want to set the manager of the group, or in eDirectory we call that the owner of the group. Same thing. So I want to say this is managed by the teacher. So let's go ahead and, let's see, I think it was a Jack. There you go. So I've got, I think, Jack Bauer out there. And who else do I have in the middle school? Chloe. So we're going to say Chloe is one of the students, and so Chloe's just going to be a member of the group. So all students would be a member. The teacher would be the manager or owner of the group, depending upon if this is Active Directory or eDirectory. All right. Add Chloe in there. So now, if I come out here, and let's take a look at my classes. Here we go. Notice how, first of all, a folder was created called Freshman English, and you can see those other folders. Storage Manager is doing that all automatically. In the background, because I've set up policies that says, hey, look at this particular container for groups being created. Once a group is created, go ahead and create a folder with that same name. If I were to take a look at who has rights to this, and it's going to, if you're in a Novell environment, this is going to look a little different because these are, NTFS rights, but it's very similar concept over there. As I could see, Jack Bauer is given all these permissions. So that's the equivalent of read, write, create, erase, modify, file scan. So the idea is the teacher should have access to everything going down. Now, if for the anyone that's a member of that group, you can see the group itself was also given some permissions. And the group doesn't have to be given at that level, because I could actually do it a little further down. So that's a common thing, is I may not do it up there, because now for that classroom, I may want to say, here's this folder now for the teacher to put their own files in there related to the class. There can be a separate area for all the individual students. So you can see here Chloe was given her own folder. So I can say all the students can have kind of their own work areas for that class, allow potentially all students to at least see the content. So for instance, if I had another student, they could come in and see Chloe's files to be able to reference them, but not be able to modify them, not be able to create any new content. Or maybe I don't allow the students to see it at all. Depends on what you're trying to do here. Instructor has their own area. I could also have a place to put assignments, so all the students would have read access to view all their assignments. And I could even have like a homework turn-in folder or a homework Dropbox where I could actually say, you know what, students aren't allowed to have anything but the create permission out there. So they can dump in their homework. Me as the teacher, I can find it and see it, but the students aren't going to be able to go in and actually be able to make any changes, ever see it again. They're just going to drop it off and be done with it. So a ton of stuff that I can do there, and now all of a sudden it's not just about home directories, it's not just about maybe personnel files, but now this is something that I can use every day as a teacher to actually help aid in the learning process. And yet you in IT, you're pretty much hands off. All you have to do is create the group, or maybe not even create it, because IDM does that for you. The student information system knows who's taking what class, so the student information system could actually even create the groups, and now this becomes 100% hands off. You just create the initial policies, the initial templates, and that's it. So very, very powerful to do that, but we haven't even talked about reporting. So far, this is showing you just the power of Storage Manager alone to manage the environment. Now, I'm going to just check real quick to see, did we have any questions come in, and I don't see anything. Again, if you do have any questions, feel free to go ahead and type them into the chat window, and we'll try to get to those. I know we've got just a few minutes left here, about 8 or so minutes. So let's talk about reporting. And I want to go in there and show a little sample here. And this is going to be hitting my environment back home. So I actually have File Reporter running in my home environment so that I can kind of illustrate some of these things. So tons of different kinds of reports, and I'm not going to go through all the different ones. I mean, just to give you an idea of how many there are, I'd just like to show this screen. And we're going to just cover a couple samples that I think are interesting to note. You can see a lot of different ones. A real interesting thing, though, bottom right, custom query. At the end of the day, if the pre-built reports, see all those other options, none of them quite give you what you want, but the data itself is there because File Reporter works by scanning your file servers and recording that information into a database, and basically these reports are querying that database. So hey, the information's there, but none of the pre-built reports present it in a way that I want. You can do a custom query report, and at that point you can query and build any kind of report you want. We have a report designer, really cool stuff. Any of you that are going to be at BrainShare, definitely encourage you to come to the lab at BrainShare where you'll be able to see a lot of that custom stuff firsthand. But anyways, just to give you an idea of some of those things, like we talked about, hey, I've added all the storage, I want to know where it's going, so show me, which users are the worst offenders that are storing all of this data. Well, I could very easily do that through this report that, boy, that's always fun when it comes up with a blank screen. So let's try this again. That's what I get sometimes for hitting my home environment. There we go. That looks a little better. And one of the things that you'll see here is that crazy J. Martin user, boy, he's using a lot of stuff. He's got almost 40 gig worth of information. And so the next one down is actually my wife, Angela. And so you can see she's about half a gig. And then you've got additional files that are being stored by some of those other people. A lot of our reports will give you that top 10. It gives you kind of a snapshot. So this can be very useful. Hey, I've added all this space, and I could see this one particular teacher is using a ton of it. Say, I'm curious what that person's actually doing. So in this case, here's, I mentioned my wife. So let's say I'm like, boy, why does she have a half a gig worth of stuff? Well, that's actually a clickable link. And once I click on it, now I can get a more detailed report of every single file that she's got. And so I could go out there and see she's got a few files that are out there. Apparently they're, I remember this was actually for her friend's bridal shower. She would kill me if she knew I was showing this off. They had some kind of game at the bridal shower about animal names or something and baby names. Particular album that she's got out there. So a lot of stuff. If we were to come back out here, take a look at mine. So let's just look at the J. Martin user. Let's be a little fair, I guess. I'll click there, and you're going to actually see the reason I'm using so many files is I've got a ton of JPEGs. Now my report might take a little while because I do have thousands and thousands of files, and so my user was actually probably a really bad example to pull up. So I'm going to let that chug for a moment because again I've got I know probably tens of thousands of files. but the bulk of that content, I can tell you, are JPEGs from all our vacations, and I'll show you a demo of that in a minute of how we can kind of graphically look at that. But the other thing I want to highlight is the permissions report, because I talk about how important that is. So if I come out here and see this is a report that I've created, this is, and you know what I've done is I've really killed my server now by trying to run a report with tens of thousands of things. So luckily I have a second file reporter instance. This is coming off just my demo system that's local, so that should allow me to go ahead and illustrate some of this thing. So here we go. Let's take a look at Amanda Cox's permissions. And let me take a look, because I've got both Windows and eDirectory stuff. So I'm actually, in this case, I'm going to be pulling up Amanda Cox out of the domain. But it just gives you an example of how we can go out and illustrate permissions. So I can go ahead and say, show me every single folder Amanda can access. And here you see all these different folders, either because it's a direct assignment or because those are some inherited rights or indirect assignments if it's the case of she's a part of a group. And I know we've got a couple of those that go, I think, towards the end of this. And there's a direct assignment, inherited, and here we go, indirect. And when I get to the indirect ones, I could see, oh, that's because she's actually members of these groups is why she can access these particular folders that are out there. Right? So very easily I can either do it on a user, or let's do it on a particular folder. Now let's switch to OES, just showing again how I can use this to report on both Active Directory and eDirectory environments. So I could come out here and say, here's this HR department folder. Who's every single user that can access it? And I can see there's one that's inherited, the admin object, because he's got rights to the root of the tree. Makes sense. But as I go through, I would expect to see a lot of indirect permissions or maybe inherited stuff. I shouldn't see too many direct permissions on here other than maybe the group itself. And that makes sense. I could see where Adam here is part of the IT administrators group, which gives him rights. I could see Amanda is part of a group that has rights. So that makes sense. I can go in and take a look at that. If I saw a direct rights assignment, I wouldn't want to take a look at why, especially if it's a specific user, because I'd say, hey, users should never be given rights. It should all be done by groups. So that's the nice thing, especially if you see that a student maybe had access to files that they shouldn't, as I talked about at the beginning here. Very easily I could go in and say, show me every folder this person can access, and again, I'm going to know where that access is coming from, so at the end of the day I know how to go ahead and remediate that. I could do immediate remediation, manually, or obviously I could see, oh, you know what, I didn't have a storage manager policy set right, that's why they had rights. Let me just go ahead and change that policy in storage manager. That way not only will it fix this, but it will also make sure that this doesn't happen again. All right, this did come up, or no, there's our permissions report there. Oh, there we go. So again, just another example. So this is my my wife here showing the different folders that she's able to access. This is a neat thing I do like to show, by the way. I don't know if anybody used the organizational role object in eDirectory, but we even will show you rights that are coming from that. I was just playing with that one day because I said, I wonder if I put someone in this org role, if we'll be able to report on those rights with File Reporter, and the answer is yes. So that was really good to know. Now, that's real neat. I'm going to go close some of these other windows down. Another thing that's new, because some of you may have seen this before, say, yeah, I've seen some of that reporting. What's something else that I can do? So here's something that's really neat, and I know we've only got a couple of minutes here, but it's something called a heat map. And basically the idea is, okay, I can do that lengthy report like what you saw a minute ago and list everything, but that still really doesn't tell me what's going on. But if I could graphically see things, then maybe I might understand better that, there's a lot more JPEGs in their MP3s or something like that. So that's exactly what's going on here. So again, like I mentioned earlier, I've got a number of vacation photos out there, a lot of JPEGs. So I could see all this data that's out there. So almost 17 gig of JPEGs alone. And so by looking at this, the red are JPEGs, the orange ones are EXEs, and so on and so forth. But it's not just kind of color coding and giving you an idea. Each square is a file. So notice these JPEGs, they're all pretty small. So as I go through here, this highlighted square is pretty tiny, and you can see the actual file itself. down there at the very bottom gives you the file name. So these are pictures from a trip we took to Hungary last year. But if I come across over here, there we go, just a little bit of lag. Notice how I've got a big square over in the orange. This was an evaluation download of Adobe Lightroom that we grabbed, and I just have been too lazy to delete it because I tend to just be like a regular user and just dump stuff on the server, never clean it up. But notice how it's a much larger square, so that's actually telling me this file is larger than these others, and that makes sense because I know that Adobe Lightroom is like several hundred megs. It's a lot bigger than, say, your average JPEG. And there's a lot of other different file types. So that's by extensions I can do it. I can do it based on owners. Almost everything's red in this case because I'm usually the owner, because normally I'm the one that's doing everything on the server. Or the other real neat thing is based on age. I can actually see what are sort of the hot areas of the disk, which are the ones that have files that are being either created most often, modified. I can very easily go ahead and change it. So if I look at modification wise, I can see almost everything here has been modified since October of 2012. Right, and then if I go ahead and start changing my slider here, I can actually get it a little more specific. So now I'm actually saying it, in order to be considered hot, it needs to be since July of 2013, so a little more recent. I can go even more recent than that, and if I do this, it says show me only files modified since March of this year. Now I only have a couple of hot areas, and then everything else is starting to kind of cool off, if you will. All part of the same solution. It's just a different tool. So I have a web interface. It's a Windows-based tool that's out there. So that being said, I think we've gone over by about a minute here. And I'm going to pause one more time just to see if we had any last-minute questions. And I don't see any questions. So Nathan, I would say thank you very much for joining today. Appreciate you kind of talking to everyone and showing your environment.
Sure, not a problem. Thanks for having me, and if you have any questions, feel free to let Joe know and to let me know. Happy to talk with anybody offline as well.
All right, cool. Well, thank you very much, Nathan, and thank you, everyone, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks. Bye-bye.